The vote was unanimous. Every single senator raised their hand, their tentacles, their bioluminescent fins, whatever appendage they used to signal agreement in the Grand Galactic Senate, and they all pointed in the same direction. Away from us. Away from Earth. My name is Vroth Kaelen, Senior Ambassador of the Delvari Collective, and I was the one who proposed the motion. I want you to understand that clearly because history has a funny way of rewriting villains into fools, and I would rather you know up front that I was both. The motion was simple, elegant, even. Earth, the third planet of an unremarkable star system at the edge of the Orion Arm, had applied for galactic community membership 4 times over the past 60 years. 4 times, we had reviewed their application. 4 times, we had said no. Not because they were too primitive, not because they lacked intelligence. It was because they were too strange. Let me explain, before you laugh. Or actually, go ahead and laugh. It is fine. I deserve it. The galactic community had encountered over 300 intelligent species across 12 star clusters. Every single species, without exception, followed what we called the progression model. You discover fire, then language, then agriculture, then cities, then war, then eventually, reluctantly, peace. Every species went through the same phases, at roughly the same pace, in roughly the same order. Then there was humanity. Humanity had discovered fire, language, agriculture, cities and war. Yes, just like everyone else. But then instead of arriving at peace through exhaustion and near extinction, like any sensible civilization, they had done something no species in recorded galactic history had ever done. They had chosen peace on purpose, not because they ran out of weapons, not because a plague wiped out enough of them to make war impractical. They had simply voluntarily decided to stop killing each other at scale. And then, while still arguing constantly about everything from territorial borders to what constituted a proper food, they had somehow simultaneously built a unified planetary government. Our analysts called it an anomaly. Our psychologists called it statistically impossible. Senator Braza Voth of the Hanari called it, and I quote directly from the Senate record, profoundly unsettling. She was not wrong. We did not exile humanity because we hated them. We exiled them because we did not understand them. And in the galaxy, things you do not understand have a tendency to become things that eventually eat you. The exile decree was straightforward. Earth would be quarantined within a 6 light-year boundary. No human vessel was permitted beyond that line. Any human ship that crossed it would be turned back by a sentinel fleet, which we assigned specifically for this purpose. We gave them the decree personally, through a formal diplomatic channel, delivered by my office. The human representative who received it was a woman named Della Hargrove. She was the Secretary General of Earth's Unified Council. She read the decree carefully. The whole thing. Every clause, every condition, every bureaucratic footnote we had stuffed into it. Then she looked up at the camera, directly at me and said, "Okay, just that. Okay. No protest, no anger, no demand for an appeal process." I remember sitting back in my chair and telling my aide Sunik that this was either the most civilized response I had ever witnessed, or the most terrifying. Sunik said, "Ambassador, why can it not be both?" It was both. For 11 years humanity stayed inside their boundary. Our Sentinel fleet monitored them continuously. Our deep-range observation posts catalogued every transmission, every launch, every energy signature coming from the Sol system. Humanity was busy. Extraordinarily busy. They were building something. We could see the construction signatures, massive ones, radiating from multiple points across their system. Jupiter's orbit was showing unusual energy concentrations. Mars had gone from a dead planet to a planet with an atmosphere in 7 years. 7 years. Our terraforming of Kovath Prime took 400 years and we considered it one of the great achievements of Delvari science. 7 years. Senator Braza Voth requested an emergency intelligence briefing. Not-tended, our chief intelligence officer, a Moraki named Drev, stood at the center of the chamber and said, with the careful, controlled voice of someone trying very hard not to panic, "We believe humanity has been using their exile productively." "How productively?" Senator Braza asked. Drev pulled up the scans. Jupiter's orbit, Saturn's orbit, the asteroid belt, the space between Mars and Earth. All of it, every empty stretch of space that had once been quiet and unremarkable, was now dotted with structures. Hundreds of them. Some were clearly industrial. Some were clearly military, and some the large ones. The ones with drives that made our analysts question their calibration equipment were clearly ships. Not exploration ships, not transport ships, warships. Braza Voth looked at the display for a long moment, then turned to me and said quietly, "Vroth, did we just lock a predator in a room and give it 11 years to prepare?" I did not answer. I did not need to, because at exactly that moment, the Senate's emergency frequency activated, and the voice of a human, calm and polite and absolutely terrifying, came through the speakers. "Galactic Senate. This is Admiral Vanek, of the Earth Unified Fleet. We are transmitting from the Proxima Centauri coordinates which, as you may notice, is slightly outside our assigned boundary. Slightly outside." The man said slightly. "We respectfully request a formal meeting with the full Senate. We have some questions about the terms of our exile, and we feel the conversation would go better in person." The chamber was absolutely silent. Then Senator Braza Voth said, in a voice so quiet it was almost a whisper, "How many ships?" Drev checked his console, then checked it again. Then said, with the expression of someone who had just realized the room they were standing in was on fire, "All of them. All of them. I want you to sit with that number for a moment, because I certainly did. In fact, I sat with it for approximately 6 seconds before my legs stopped working, and I had to grip the edge of my console to stay upright. All of them. Every ship humanity had built during 11 years of quiet, cooperative, suspiciously polite exile had just materialized at Proxima Centauri. Our sensor arrays counted 412 vessels, not scout ships, not small patrol crafts with 2 crew members and a lunchbox. These were full-scale warships, each one radiating enough energy to power a mid-sized colony planet for a decade. Drev kept staring at his console like he was hoping the numbers would change if he looked at them long enough. They did not change. Senator Braza Voth turned to me slowly, with the expression of someone who had just remembered they left something very dangerous unattended, and said, "Vroth, you wrote the exile decree." "Yes," I said. "You personally reviewed the terms." "Yes." "Did you include any clause at all restricting what humanity could build inside the boundary?" I opened my mouth. I closed it. I opened it again. "No," I said. Braza stared at me for a long moment. Then she turned back to the display showing 412 human warships sitting at Proxima Centauri like they owned the neighborhood. And she said, very softly, "Vroth, you absolute fool." She was not wrong. I want to be clear about that. She was absolutely, completely, 100% correct, and I have never once argued otherwise. We opened the communication channel. Admiral Vanek appeared on screen. He was a middle-aged human, broad-shouldered, with short gray hair and the kind of expression that suggested he had slept very well the previous night and was looking forward to a productive day. He was wearing a dark uniform with no excessive decoration, no medals, no dramatic insignia, just clean lines and a calm face. He smiled when the channel opened. Not a threatening smile, not a victorious smile, just a normal, polite, professional smile. The kind you give someone when you walk into a meeting you have been preparing for extensively, and they have not. "Senators," he said, "thank you for taking our call." Senator Braza, who had more composure than any being I have ever known, managed to keep her voice completely steady when she responded. "Admiral Vanek, you are aware that your fleet's current position violates the terms of the exile decree." "We are," Vanek said pleasantly. "We wanted to discuss that. You could have filed a formal appeal." "We did," Vanek said. 4 times. Over 60 years we kept getting told no. The chamber was very quiet. Vanek let that sit for exactly the right amount of time, not long enough to be aggressive, just long enough to make sure every senator in the room had done the mental arithmetic themselves. Then he continued, still calm, still smiling. "We are not here to start a war. I want to be very clear about that. Earth has no interest in a war. We spent a significant portion of our history fighting wars and we found them, on balance, inefficient and exhausting. What we are here for is a conversation. A real one. The kind where both sides actually listen." Senator Dorvin Kal of the Meraki Confederation, who had been quiet until now, leaned forward. "And if we refuse the conversation," Vanek tilted his head slightly, "then we will wait. We are very good at waiting, as I think you have noticed. 11 years of waiting turned into 412 warships." Yes, we had noticed. The formal emergency session of the Galactic Senate convened within the hour. Every faction was represented. Every major species sent their senior delegates scrambling to their seats with the frantic energy of people who had just realized the situation they were in was significantly more serious than the one they had thought they were in 40 minutes ago. Humanity sent 3 representatives aboard a single shuttle. 412 warships. And they sent 3 people in a shuttle. The delegation was led by Secretary General Della Hargrove, the same woman who had received our exile decree 11 years ago, and responded with a single quiet, devastating word. She walked into the Senate chamber like she had been there 100 times before. She sat down at the designated seat, folded her hands on the table and looked around the room at 400 alien senators, with the expression of someone who had arrived at a meeting slightly early and was content to wait. Beside her sat a younger man named Petrov Aldane, who I later learned was Earth's chief legal architect, the person who had spent 11 years reading every piece of galactic community law ever written, and finding every gap, every ambiguity, every clause that could be interpreted 2 different ways. The third member of the delegation was an older woman named Suri Barak, who said almost nothing during the entire session, but whose eyes moved constantly, cataloging everything, missing nothing. Hargrove spoke first. "We are not asking for membership anymore," she said. That surprised us. Several senators shifted in their seats. "Then what are you asking for?" Voth said. "Partnership," Hargrove said simply. "Equal partnership. Not as applicants, not as probationary members under observation, as equals." Petrov Aldane opened a document on the table display. "We have prepared a revised treaty framework. It addresses mutual defense, trade access, territorial rights, and diplomatic representation. It is, we believe, very reasonable." Senator Kaelen said, "And if we find it unreasonable?" Hargrove smiled. It was not a threatening smile either. That was the part that made it so difficult to argue against. She never needed to threaten. The 412 ships sitting at Proxima Centauri were doing that entirely on their own. "Then we negotiate," Hargrove said. "We are very good at that too." Braza Voth called a recess. She pulled me aside in the corridor, looked at me with an expression that had moved well past frustration into something closer to exhausted respect, and said, "Vroth, when we wrote that decree, when we exiled them, we thought we were containing something dangerous." "Yes," I said. "We were wrong." "Yes," I said. "We were not containing something dangerous," she said slowly. "We were giving something dangerous 11 uninterrupted years to become something worse." She was not wrong about that either. We went back into the chamber. We signed the treaty. All of it. Every clause. Every term. Every condition. Petrov Aldane had spent 11 years carefully constructing inside a boundary we had built and been very proud of. And Della Hargrove, when the last signature was recorded, looked up at the chamber full of senators who had once voted unanimously to push her species to the edge of the galaxy, and said, with perfect maddening calm, "Thank you. We look forward to working together." Suri Barak, the quiet one, the one who had said almost nothing the entire session, leaned slightly toward Hargrove and murmured something I was close enough to hear. She said, "That took longer than expected." Hargrove said, "We were patient." Barak said, "We were always patient." And that, I think, was the moment I truly understood humanity. Not when they built the ships, not when they crossed the boundary, not when they walked into our Senate and rewrote the terms of their own exile with documents they had been preparing for a decade. It was that sentence. We were always patient. Because patience, in the galaxy, is not a virtue. It is a strategy. And humanity had been running that strategy since the day Della Hargrove looked into a camera, read a decree that exiled her entire species, and said, with complete and total composure, "Okay." They were never afraid of us. They were waiting for us to realize we should have been afraid of them.